are introduction, objects around us, materials around us, why is sorting needed, properties of materials wherein we will talk about appearance, hardness, solubility, flotation and transparency. So, what are the objects that we see around ourselves? What are the things that you see around you? So, if you immediately start looking around, you will see a lot of things inside your house. Maybe if you peep into the kitchen, you'll be able to see utensils. If you peep into your living room, you'll be able to see a television, sofa set, chairs, tables, books, pens, pencils, refrigerators, etc. So there are so many things that exist around us. Now, when you look at this huge variety of objects, so you see things like dresses, bags, shoes, wallets. You also see electrical equipments like tube lights, bulbs, electric fans. You also see a lot of other living organisms. You also see a lot of other vehicles, for example, bicycle, bike, cars, trucks. So there are actually a very huge variety of objects that we see around us. Now, have you ever thought what are these objects made up of? So if you try to focus on the composition of each object, you will see that every object is made up of some other material. I mean, not only one material, maybe a group of materials together form an object. So let's take the example of so you see so many things on the screen. So let's take the example of, say, a bulb. So a bulb contains glass. So you actually see a glass covering outside. Inside you see a filament which is made up of a metal. So basically a piece of metal, a piece of glass, few wires, all these things together make a bulb. Similarly, if you look at any container, so in your kitchen or anywhere else, you would have seen a lot of containers which are used for storing things, or even containers which are used to store liquids like water. So these containers, they can be made up of plastics, they can be made up of steel, they can be made up of tin. So you see a lot of variety. So a plastic container will look very much different from a steel container, which again will look quite different from a tin container. You think of a pen, I think, which is very handy to each one of you. So when you look at this pen can be made up of plastic. The pen can also be made up of any metal, right? So one particular object can be made up of many different materials. So a particular object can be made up of plastic, it can be made up of glass, it can be made up of wood. So in this lesson, we are going to understand that why do we need to sort materials? Sort means to classify materials into different groups so that we are able to choose which material should be used to make which object. So I hope that I have been able to at least give you a brief about object and material, how object is different from material. So if you are not clear with it yet, so let's have a clear distinction between objects and materials, because these are the two terms which I will be using very often hereafter. So when we talk about an object, it refers to anything that can be seen or felt. So if I see a glass, so that glass is an object. I see a cup, the cup is an object. I see a pressure cooker, the pressure cooker is an object. So I see a table, that's an object. I see a chair, that's an object. So anything that we see around us, or or something whose presence can be felt around us, so that is an object. Now when we go deep down, we see that every object is made up of some materials. So material refers to the matter from which a thing is made. So basically objects are made up of materials. So when I say that a cup is an object, now this cup can be made up of glass, so glass is a material. The cup can also be made up of, let's say, plastic. So the plastic is also a material here. So when you talk about, let's say, utensils, if I say that utensils are the object which we see around us, it can be a pan, it can be the cutlery, it can be a pot, it can be anything. So these utensils are the objects which we can see around us. The utensils can be made up of glass or plastic or paper. For example, here you can see this is also a utensil. It is also a cup kind of thing which is made up of paper. This is also a glass which is again a utensil in a way, but it is made up of plastic. And this is again a cup which is made up of glass. So you see, this is made up of glass, this is made up of paper, and this is made up of plastic. But all of these are utensils. So utensils are objects, and each of these is nothing but material. So any particular object can be made up of many different materials. Similarly, any material can make many different types of objects. For example, paper can be used to make a paper glass. Paper can also be used to make a book. Paper can also be used to make a notebook. Paper can also be used to make a paper boat. So basically, one particular material can again be used in different ways to make different objects. So this is how we distinguish objects from materials. It very clearly tells us that any particular object can be made up of a variety of materials. So here I have taken the example of a chair. So when you think of a chair, you can think of a plastic chair. You can think of a chair which is made up of leather. You can think of a leather chair. You can think of a wooden chair. You can also think of a fabric chair which has cloth in it. You can also think of a fiber chair. So you see, all of these are chairs. So their purpose is the same. So these are the things over which people can sit. So the purpose of chair remains the same. But the material of which they are made up of are different. Somewhere it is leather, somewhere it is fabric, somewhere it is wood, somewhere it is plastic. Now depending on the material, the type of the chair changes. The comfort that each of these chairs give, that also changes. So looking at this picture, it clearly tells you that any particular object, so here which is the object, chair is the object, and this chair can be made up of a variety of materials. Now here we will see another interesting thing, that it is not only that one object can be made up of many different types of materials. It is also possible that a particular material can make many different objects. For example, let's think of paper. So paper is a material which can be used to make notebooks, it can be used to make books, it can also be used to make toys, it can also be used to make utensils like we saw, the paper cups. So basically the same material, that is paper, can be used to make a variety of objects. So one particular material, which is paper, can be used to make a variety of objects. For example, notebooks. You can make paper cups, you can make paper boats, which are nothing but, you can say, kind of toys. A lot of other toys are also made out of paper. Paper can also be used to make books. So basically you can make a lot of stuffs from paper. So this proves that an object can be made up of many types of materials. A material can be used to make many different kinds of objects. Okay, so we have been talking about objects and materials since the beginning. Now you might be thinking that, okay, this lesson is about sorting materials into groups. Now, why are we talking about objects and materials? So you will understand that very, very soon. Now, the question here is, let's say you want to get a dress stitched for yourself. So you want a beautiful dress. Now your dress is made up of what? Cloth, right? It can be a cotton cloth, it can be a satin cloth, it can be a synthetic cloth, it can be a polyester cloth, but it is made up of a cloth. Why is your dress not made up of wood? Why can't you get a beautiful dress stitched with wood instead of cloth? Can you do that? No. So why did you select a particular cloth in order to get a dress for yourself, and why not wood? So how do you decide that which material will be used to make a particular object? So till now I have been talking about materials and objects. Now when I told you that books are made up of papers, so why books are made up of papers and not wood? Similarly, when I say that utensils are made up of plastics, so why utensils are made up of plastics and not cloth? So, on what basis do we decide that which material should be used for making which object? So, that is the main question that will get answered by the end of this lesson. Because here we are trying to understand why are we sorting materials? Why are we grouping materials? We are separating materials into various groups. And how are we dividing them into groups? That we will see a little later. But the agenda of this lesson is to understand how we decide which material will be used to make which object. Let's say you want a container that can store water. Okay, so you want any such container. So what comes to your mind when you think of making a container to store water? So one option is a plastic bottle which can store liquid water. The second option is a piece of cloth. So which one do you think would be a better option? Of course, I think the plastic bottle would be a better option. Now, why can't you use a piece of cloth to store water? That's because even if you make something in the shape of a bottle using the cloth, what will happen? As soon as you pour water, water will pass through the cloth because the cloth has tiny pores. It has tiny holes and the water will pass through that cloth. So you will not be able to store water. Right? So what decided here that plastic would be a better choice than cloth to store water? The property of plastic and the property of cloth. So the cloth has a property that it allows water to pass through it, and the plastic has a property that it doesn't allow water to pass through it. Moreover, plastic is more stable. You can give it a particular shape and it will remain stable. For cloth, it's kind of flexible and stretchable, so it doesn't get a specific shape. So that way we can say that plastic was a better option. Right? So here we moved a step ahead. So we got to know that different materials will have different properties, and these properties will decide which material is suitable for making which object. Again, think of a situation where you want to make jewelry. I think jewelry is something which is very common amongst us. We all know what are jewelry, what are ornaments. So when you want to make your jewelry, what kind of material would you choose for it? Paper or metals? So preferably we will use metals, because why do we wear jewelry? First of all, so that it looks good, so that it looks like it should be shining bright, and normally these type of properties are present in metal. So if you look at any metal, whether you talk about gold, you talk about silver, you talk about copper, you talk about iron, so all of these metals will have a shine of their own, and because of that shine, when you make jewelry out of these metals, you get shining jewelry. So that's why they are preferred over paper. Whereas paper, it doesn't have any shine. Moreover, it will not again have any structural stability. So even if you make some jewelry with paper, you might be able to wear it once or twice, but it will not be lasting long when compared to the metallic jewelry. So that is why metals are preferred for making jewelry. So different materials have different properties. So now, and these different properties of different materials decide where they will be used, or in order to make what kind of objects they will be used. So we have taken a couple of examples, right? We have taken the example of paper. We took the example for metals, which are used for making ornaments because of their shine. Similarly, when we looked at the bottle made of water, which could properly hold water, a bottle made of plastic, which could properly hold water. So this ability of the bottle to hold water enabled it to make the water bottle. So that means the properties of various materials decide what will be their purpose, or where they will be used to make objects. comes the concept of sorting. Now, how sorting helps? The word sorting means to classify objects into different groups or to classify materials into various groups. So here in this lesson, we are going to learn about how we sort materials. Now, how is sorting going to help us? So let us look at this example. So let's say that we want a bell to be made. So a bell. What is the basic purpose of the bell? So it should produce some sound. Now let's say that we have 4 options of materials. So one option is wood, the second option is paper, the third option is a metal, and the fourth option is glass. So these are the 4 options which are available to us, and out of these, which option will you choose to make a bell? Okay, so which one would be the best option, do you think? So obviously, I'm sure you would say metal, because the bells which you would have seen around yourself are made up of metals. Now, why not wood? Because wood does not produce sound. So even if you strike something with wood, you do not get a sound like how you get in case of metals. And the purpose of bell is to produce sound. Again, when you talk about paper, paper neither produces sound nor is it strong enough. I mean, for bell, when you actually shake it or when you vibrate it, it should be strong enough that it should not get broken or it should not get torn. So the paper is not strong enough. When you talk about glass, the glass is again quite fragile. So if you strike it hard with some other object, it will break. But when you try to look at the properties of a metal, you see that metal can produce sound. So metal will be able to produce sound. Metal is hard enough. So it's like hard and strong and tough enough. And it also produces sound, and it is definitely not fragile. So that means metal has the properties which are suitable for making a bell. So if we know the properties of a particular material, we will be able to decide whether we can use that material to make a particular object or not. Now, when we talk about sorting, we basically divide different materials into different groups based on their properties. For example, we say that metals are sonorous. Now, when we use the term sonorous, that means these are those materials which produce sound when they are struck. Now, since metals produce sound, so they are sonorous. Similarly, we categorize or we sort metals into the group of hard objects. Whereas we do not put cotton into the category of hard materials. Right, so that ways, depending upon the properties of different materials, we will classify them into different groups, and that is called sorting. Now, why are we doing sorting? Because it will help us to understand the properties of different materials, and that's how it will help us to know which material to be used for making which object. Now the question is, why are we sorting materials? So sorting materials is almost like arranging things inside your house. So let's say that in your house you have a living room, you have a dining room, you have a kitchen, you have a bathroom, you have a study room, you have a bedroom. So there are different sections inside our house, and different sections have different types of objects. So let's say that all these objects are just scattered in your house. So how would you feel? Why do we have these different sections in our house? So that different objects are placed in these different sections that help us to very conveniently find out materials whenever we need them. Let's say you need a knife. Where would you go for? You'll go into the kitchen, because normally inside the kitchen you have a knife. Where if you are looking for, say, a pen, so the pen would normally be in your study room. So you will directly go into your study room and look for a pen. So when you have all these objects, what do? We categorize them or we sort them into different groups, and the different groups here are the different rooms. Let's say the mixie should be placed in the kitchen. When you look at the carrot, it should also be there in the kitchen. The microwave, again in the kitchen. You talk about a pen, that should be in the study room. The books and the notebooks, they should also be in the study room. When you talk about toiletries like soap, that should be in the bathroom. So you see, different objects based on their use, they have been put into different rooms. So that's how you have actually sorted these materials. So now if you want toothpaste, so where will you go? You will directly go into the bathroom. right? And you have the toothpaste there. So that's how the sorting helped here. Now since you have grouped different objects in different rooms, so it helps you, it makes things convenient to you. In a similar way, when we sort materials into different groups based on their properties, that also helps us to identify a particular material, to identify the characteristic of a particular material. Let's say I want to build an object, like how I took the example of the bell. So when I want to choose a material that should be used to make a bell, so first I have to list down what are the properties that I need in that material. For example, it should be hard, it should be able to produce sound, it should not be fragile. Now looking at these three properties, we will start looking at those groups of materials which fulfill these properties, and then we can select one of those materials from that group. So the entire process of selection becomes very convenient. So that is why we talk about sorting materials into groups. Now, this entire process of sorting is based on the properties of materials. Now, what are those properties based on which we will look at different materials? Some of the important properties are appearance, how they look, how they appear, hardness, solubility, flotation, and transparency. So, we are going to talk about each of these properties in detail.